Hello friends, this video on chemical effects of current part 9 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Comes the most important question of this lesson, that we saw that liquids conduct electricity. Some of them conduct it easily, some of them conduct it not that great, but yes, liquids are capable of conducting electricity. Now the question is, what happens to the liquid when current passes through it? Now we will look at the changes which take place in the liquid as long as the current is flowing through the liquid. So that is what we are going to see in the next section. Now, there are chemical changes which take place in the solution. So the solution through which current is flowing, those solutions are undergoing a lot of chemical changes. Now, what do we mean by chemical changes? Changes which take place due to the formation of new chemical substances. Now, chemical changes always involve making of bonds or breaking of bonds. So, bond formation might happen, bond breaking of bonds might happen. So whenever bonds break or new bonds are formed, only then you get new chemical substances. Sometimes a bigger substance splits to form two different chemical substances. Sometimes two smaller chemical substances, they join together to form a bigger substance. So they all are examples of chemical changes. So these kind of chemical changes take place in the solution when current is passing through it. So let us take this example. Let us suppose I take the example of salt solution. So you see here, now this is the salt solution. Salt solution contains what? Sodium chloride. Now it has been seen that when current actually passes through it, there are chances that the salt might dissociate. That is, it might split into the sodium ions and the chloride ions. So any kind of changes of this sort, they will be termed as chemical changes. So now we will see what kind of exact chemical changes take place in the solution. Now the next question is, how do we know that chemical changes has occurred? Now even if some changes have occurred, how do we get to know that okay, some changes are taking place when current is flowing through a solution? Now some of the visible changes are change in color of the solution. Now if the solution was colorless before, now it turned into blue color, or now it turned reddish. So if there is some change in color, that means some new substances are being formed due to which the color is changing. Sometimes there are deposits on the electrodes. Like whenever we talk about electric current, there has to be two electrodes, a positive electrode and a negative electrode. Like even the simpler circuits which we build, that has a cell or a battery. So in that cell or the battery, you have two electrodes, a positive terminal, a negative terminal, right? Now sometimes it has been observed that there are some deposits, some new metals or some new material gets collected on one of those electrodes. Formation of bubbles on electrodes, sometimes some new gases like oxygen or hydrogen are formed and the gas bubbles are seen on the electrodes. So these are some of the changes which tell us that chemical changes take place within the solution when current flows through it. Now in order to feel it yourself, if you want to see that okay, if you want to perform a small experiment and check it for yourself, then you can try this out. We call this the potato experiment. So all you need for this experiment is a potato. Take a potato, cut it into two halves, and then on one half you put your tester, the same setup, a small bulb along with a battery, and then you put it inside the potato. You insert the free ends of your tester inside this potato. Now what happens? Now potato is a good conductor of electricity. Now as soon as you insert it into the potato, the bulb glows, which says that it is a good conductor. Now all you need to do is just leave it like this for a couple of minutes, maybe some 15-20 minutes. You just leave it like this. Do not disturb it. So for these 15-20 minutes, what is happening? Actually current is flowing through this circuit. So how is the circuit completed? Like this, because the two free ends are being connected together by this potato, right? So this is how the entire circuit is completed. So that means for these couple of minutes, current is flowing through this potato, correct? So As per our expectation, some chemical changes must be taking place in the potato. So what happens after those couple of minutes? After a couple of minutes, you see that a greenish spot is formed on one of those electrodes. Now, here in this case, we will consider these two as the two electrodes, one representing the positive side, the other representing the negative terminal. Correct? Because this one is coming from the negative terminal of the battery, this one is coming from the positive terminal. So you see a greenish spot on the potato. So from where does this green color come into picture? It must have been a result of some chemical changes which would have taken place in the potato. And this spot was seen along the wire which is connected to the positive terminal. So this wire is connected to the positive terminal, this one is connected to the negative terminal. Now that this experiment, if you try to perform it by changing the terminals or by changing the substance, you will always see that a spot is formed on the positive terminal. So in one way, this experiment can be used to find out the positive and the negative terminal of a circuit. Now let us suppose if you are given a circuit and you have to find out which is the positive terminal and which is the negative terminal. So you can perform an experiment like this, and wherever you see the greenish spot, that is going to be the positive terminal. So now the most important question, why do we get this greenish spot? So the observation here is the appearance of greenish blue spot around the wire connected to positive terminal. Now what we are curious to know now is how this greenish spot is formed. Now do you think anything here has a green or a greenish blue color? Just think for a bit. Yes, it is nothing but the wires which have this color. Now generally what are these wires made up of? I never talked about these wires. So now let us suppose in this experiment the wires were actually made up of copper, and copper is greenish blue in color. So now are you getting some idea that from where this greenish blue color appears on the potato? Yes, so that in this case these wires act as the electrodes. Correct? So these two wires act as the positive and the negative electrode. And which is the electrolyte in this case? Electrolyte is nothing but the potato. So the potato acts as the electrolyte, which is the medium through which the electron transfer from one electrode to another electrode takes place. Now what happens is when current flows, electrons move from one electrode to another electrode. So these chemical reactions lead to current, and potato being the electrolyte, it facilitates the transfer of copper ions in the solution. So the copper ions actually move through the solution, and due to the presence of or due to the deposit of these copper ions, the greenish blue spot is seen on this electrode. Now potato acts as an electrolyte. So what acid potato contains? Potato contains phosphoric acid, that is H3PO4. This is present in the potato. So this H3PO4 facilitates the electrochemical, or it initiates the electrochemical reaction which takes place here. So due to these electrolyte, now the negative electrode and the positive electrode both are made up of copper. Now when there is a reaction which starts in the electrolyte, what happens is the copper ions get transferred between the electrodes, and due to the deposition of copper ions here, we get a greenish blue spot here. So this is how the entire chemical reaction. So from this you understand, with this experiment you get to know that some chemical changes take place between the electrodes and the electrolyte, because of which all these changes happen, and all these happen only when current is flowing through the solution. So there is another experiment which was performed by a scientist called Nicholson. So he was an English chemist who performed experiments with the electrodes and electrolyte. So what he did was he immersed electrodes in water, So this was water, and he had immersed the positive and the negative electrodes into water. And what did he observe? He observed that oxygen bubbles were seen on the positive electrode. So this is the positive electrode. Positive electrode is called anode, and cathode is the name given to the negative electrode. So on the positive electrode, he saw the presence of oxygen bubbles. So here he saw oxygen bubbles, and on the negative electrode, he found hydrogen bubbles. So hydrogen and oxygen bubbles were seen on the positive and negative electrodes respectively. So this proved that there were some chemical reactions taking place in the water, because of which all oxygen and hydrogen formation is taking place. So this was another experiment which proved that chemical changes take place in a solution when electric current is passing through it. So the observation was bubbles of oxygen formed on the positive electrode and bubbles of hydrogen formed on the negative electrode. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more educational videos with a better experience. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for latest updates. Thank you once again.